On November 14th, 1999, Time magazine set out to uncover the mystery behind one of the biggest, if not the biggest, pop culture phenomenon to ever exist. To do this, they sat down and interviewed the man who brought this craze into the homes of millions of families all around the world. A man named Satoshi Tajiri. Time wanted to get to the bottom of what made his transmedia world that included handheld RPG video games, a highly collectible card game, a hit manga and TV series, upcoming theatrical movie, and merchandising metropolis into the behemoth franchise that it was. Time had to know the secrets as to how this brand took over the world. Their biggest question was, what is Pokémon? Our story begins on August 28th, 1965, in the countryside area of Machida, Japan. On this bright and sunny day, a baby boy was born to a Nissan car salesman and his housewife. They named the boy Satoshi Tajiri. Satoshi was diagnosed with autism at an early age, and was often described as a creative, eccentric, and reclusive child. In his young years, Satoshi's favorite thing to do was collect bugs. It was easy to find unique insects in the rural town of Machida, and other children in his neighborhood would often call him Dr. Bug for his love of insects. As a kid, Satoshi dreamed of turning his passionate hobby of insect collecting into a career as an entomologist. However, as the years went by, and Japan grew into the huge urban landscape that we know today, the town of Machida eventually fell victim to this industrialization, and there were fewer and fewer bugs for young Satoshi to collect. As he grew up in this new modernized version of Machida, he wished he could share the passion he once had for insect collecting with the city kids that had moved into his neighborhood. Another one of Satoshi's beloved pastimes was watching television. One of his favorite shows was Ultraman, a sci-fi superhero show that aired on the Tokyo Broadcast System from July 17, 1966 to April 9, 1967. The main character, the hero Ultraman, would often battle alongside kaiju-esque monsters that he stored in little capsules when not in use. It was when Satoshi was a teenager that he was first introduced to video games. His parents denounced his new hobby of going to the arcade to play games and considered him a delinquent for it, but that never stopped Satoshi. His favorite cabinet to play was Space Invaders. His love for this game eventually pushed him towards other similar games. When he got his first Famicom, which would soon be known as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, in other parts of the world, he took the console apart to figure out how it worked. His love for video games eventually escalated into him coming up with his own game ideas, one of which won first prize in a contest being held by video game giant Sega. Satoshi's life became so engulfed by gaming that he was constantly cutting classes in high school, and he almost didn't graduate. Satoshi's disregard for his education both confused and upset his parents, who felt like he was throwing his future away to just play some games. His father even managed to find him a job at the Tokyo Electric Power Company, but Satoshi declined to take the position. After high school, he did not go to college, but instead pursued a 2-year technical degree at the Tokyo National College of Technology, majoring in electronics and computer science. With his love of video games raging on, in 1981, Satoshi decided to publish his own fanzine entitled Game Freak, a handwritten and stapled journal detailing all the goings-on in the arcade gaming scene. Production of Satoshi's doujinshi, otherwise known as self-published periodical publication, was entirely handled by Satoshi himself, until one day when aspiring artist and fellow gaming enthusiast Ken Sugimori saw Satoshi's magazine in a doujinshi shop and decided to join him on the project. The magazine ran until 1986, but only because Satoshi was pursuing bigger goals. He noticed a lack of quality in some of the games that were coming out and decided he was going to do something about it by creating good quality games of his own. He studied the Family Basic Game Programming Language, the one that all NES games were using at the time, to understand how NES games were made. The two friends then purchased the hardware needed to make their own video games and rebranded Game Freak from a fanzine to a video game company in 1989. Upon creation of the new Game Freak Inc., Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori enlisted the help of composer and fellow game developer Junichi Masuda to help them create their first game. It was now time to get their first game as a development studio off the ground. Game Freak went to Namco to pitch their first title, and Namco, alongside Hudson Soft, agreed to distribute it for the NES. It was called Quinty, which was later renamed Mandel Palace for Western releases. This action puzzle game's premise involved a man named Carton, whose goal was to rescue his girlfriend Jenny, who had been kidnapped by his younger sister Quinty. While working with Game Freak, Satoshi also began writing for a handful of Japanese gaming magazines, including the official Family Computer magazine, where he reviewed Famicom games. In April 1989, Nintendo released their new handheld console called the Game Boy. The console was very sophisticated for its time, allowing for bigger gaming experiences to be taken on the go with a system that could fit into your pocket. It even allowed multiplayer gaming with a device called a link cable that connected two Game Boys together. Nintendo had high hopes for the system, and its launch was a huge success, selling all 300,000 of its initial first-wave units in just the first 2 weeks of its release. It was in 1990 that Satoshi Tajiri had an idea that would later change the world. One day, Satoshi saw two children out in public playing with their Game Boys connected via a link cable. As Satoshi watched these kids gaming on their handheld systems, he harkened back to his childhood when he used to collect insects, and envisioned digital bugs crawling back and forth between the two children's Game Boys via the link cable. This incident, combined with his old love for the Ultraman TV show, sparked an idea for a new game, a game he decided to call Capsule Monsters. Satoshi thought he had struck gold with this idea, and that it would be a perfect fit for Nintendo's new system. Nintendo was impressed with Satoshi's previous work, so the company decided to hear Satoshi's pitch for a new game in 1990, but he was met with little faith. Nintendo couldn't grasp the concept of a game in which players caught monsters with capsules and used the link cable to trade them. They turned Satoshi's idea down at first, but given his reputation within the industry as a respected game developer, Nintendo eventually agreed to explore the concept. Game Freak was having a hard time trying to secure the copyrights for the title of Capsule Monsters, which led to the name being changed to Capumon, spelled with a C, then Capumon, spelled with a K, and eventually the final name of Pocket Monsters was chosen. Several creatures for the Pocket Monsters game were conceptualized in this early stage of development. Some of these creatures included Nidorino, Gengar, Lapras, Rhydon, and Slowbro. Having the creatures battle each other as a core element of gameplay wasn't part of Satoshi's original concept. It was only added later on in development. Satoshi eventually compromised on this aspect of the game by letting the creatures battle, but never having any of them bleed or die. Instead, the creatures would merely faint when defeated. Satoshi said he didn't want to fill the gaming world with more, quote, pointless violence. Shigeru Miyamoto, creator of many of Nintendo's most popular IPs, including the Mario, Zelda, Donkey Kong, and Pikmin series, took a liking to Satoshi and his team over at Game Freak, and it was ultimately to Miyamoto's credit that Nintendo gave Satoshi's Pocket Monsters concept a chance. Upon hearing the concept of this game, Miyamoto suggested that Game Freak should create 2 versions of the same game, with certain creatures only available to certain versions. Miyamoto believed that this would encourage players to trade more using the Game Boy's link cable than Satoshi's previous idea of simply making some creatures rarer to encounter than others. Satoshi agreed with this idea, and production began on Pocket Monsters Red version and Pocket Monsters Green version. Once development began on the new title, Game Freak hired more employees to help them program the game. Satoshi Tajiri became the director of the project. Ken Sugimori took on the task of art direction for the game, including the design of all 150 playable creatures. Junichi Masuda would assume the roles of the game's composer and sound designer. Masuda utilized the 4 channels of the Game Boy's audio to create both the music for the game as well as each individual creature's battle cry that would be heard when the player encountered them in the game. Game Freak pushed themselves to make sure the game was their best one to date. However, as the game dragged on in development for years, and the Game Boy started to lose its popularity with consumers, Game Freak was worried that they wouldn't be able to finish the game. But Miyamoto encouraged Satoshi and his team every step of the way, and mentored Satoshi in any way he could. Pocket Monsters Red and Green took nearly 6 years to develop, and Game Freak nearly went bankrupt from trying to develop these games. Satoshi, fearful for the well-being of his company, decided to make a sacrifice in order to save it. Satoshi stopped taking a salary and worked for free, living off his father's income, so the company could afford to pay the other workers. Eventually, Game Freak managed to secure an investment from Creatures Inc., an affiliate of Nintendo, and the games were finally able to be completed. Pocket Monsters Red version and Pocket Monsters Green version were released in Japan for the Game Boy on February 27, 1996. However, by this time, the Game Boy was considered to be on its last leg, since sales for the system were at a slow trickle. Nintendo was skeptical that Satoshi's new game would do well on the system, and the media barely paid it any mind either, but the sales were steadily increasing after the game's released. The 2 versions of the games were highly promoted by Nintendo, which prompted many consumers to buy both versions, thus making the game a huge success. Nintendo watched in awe as Satoshi's new experimental title rose to be one of the company's highest-selling games of all time. And as critics praised its originality and multiplayer link cable functionality, particularly with trading. The sales of Pocket Monsters Red and Green ultimately helped sales of Nintendo's Game Boy in the end, saving the system from certain extinction, and keeping it popular until the company was ready to release their next handheld system. Pocket Monsters Red and Green, as well as a special blue version that was released later in 1996 to fix some of the errors and decisions made in the original games, takes place in the fictional Kanto region, made up of various routes and inhabited cities where both people and Pocket Monsters reside. The player assumes the role of a young boy named Satoshi, a reference to the game's creator, who aims to collect all 150 Pocket Monsters and register them in the Pokédex, an electronic encyclopedia for the creatures. They also aim to defeat their Pocket Monsters rival, Shigeru, named after Shigeru Miyamoto, battle with their Pocket Monsters against gym leaders and their creatures to earn badges, face off against 4 elite Pocket Monster trainers, and finally defeat the Pocket Monster champion to become one themselves. The player also battles against the nefarious Team Rocket, who aim to take over the Kanto region. After the player is victorious, they were allowed to encounter the legendary Pocket Monster Mewtwo and potentially capture it. Players could also use the link cable to battle or trade Pocket Monsters with other players who own the game. Possibly the game's biggest reason for becoming so popular was a rumor started by creator Satoshi Tajiri about there being a secret 151st Pocket Monster named Mew hidden in the game. He stated that it was originally just intended to be a joke for the developers working on the game and was not something that consumers were meant to find. Players went crazy trying to find this legendary creature, and years later discovered a glitch in the game that could be exploited to finally find it. In retrospect, Satoshi has said that if number 151 was never added into the game in secret, the series may not have been successful enough to see a release in the Western world. Due to the success of Pocket Monsters in Japan, Game Freak realized they had a juggernaut on their hands. 2 months after the release of Pocket Monsters Red and Green in April of 1996, the Pocket Monsters manga series was released by CoroCoro Comic. In the fall of that year, Game Freak decided to shorten the title of Pocket Monsters to simply Pokémon. October 1996 saw the rise of the Pokémon trading card game by Media Factory in Japan. In early April of 1997, OLM Studio picked up Pokémon as an anime series to be aired on TV Tokyo and similar sister networks. Japanese toy manufacturer Takara Tomy was also interested in producing a toy line for the franchise. The popularity for Pokémon was spiraling out of control, and Game Freak knew that they needed an outside source to handle the brand. In April of 1998, Game Freak, Nintendo, and Creatures Inc. all partnered together to create a new company to manage aspects of the Pokémon brand. They named the company Pokémon Center Co. Limited, named after the Pokémon hospitals found in the games that players would go to in order to heal their Pokémon after a battle. Later that month, the newly formed Pokémon Center Company opened a store for Pokémon merchandise called Pokémon Center Tokyo, located in Nihonbashi, Tokyo. It was finally time to grace the West with the wonderful world of Pokémon. On September 28, 1998, Pokémon Red and Blue versions, updated English language releases of the original Red and Green versions that were released in Japan, were released in the USA. 2 weeks before the game had released, 4Kids Entertainment released their English dub of the Pokémon anime on the Kids WB network. The first few seasons of the anime followed the adventures of 10-year-old Ash Ketchum as he traveled the Kanto region with his partner Pokémon Pikachu and his companions Brock, the leader of the Pewter City Gym, and Misty, one of the 4 gym leaders of the Cerulean City Gym, in his quest to become a Pokémon Master. In the near future, other pieces of the Pokémon brand would be released in the West as well, including the Pokémon toys, which were produced by Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast releasing an English version of the trading card game, and Viz Media printing English translations of the various Pokémon manga. The States would also see Pokémon Yellow version, otherwise known as the Special Pikachu Edition, released 11 months later on October 18, 1999. This game would follow more closely to the storyline of the animated series, but still feature much of the same core gameplay as the previous Red and Blue versions. By 1997, Pocket Monsters Red, Green, and Blue had sold 10.4 million copies, and Pokemon Red and Blue in North America and the UK would go on to sell an additional 13.41 million copies. Later, in 2009, IGN would declare Pokemon Red and Blue to be the best-selling RPG on the Game Boy and the best-selling RPG of all time. In the Pokemon community, there is a theory that different games in the series take place in different universes. This has been dubbed the Pokemon Multiverse theory by fans. It is believed that in the Pokemon world there are 4 different universes, each with their own timeline. These are known as the original timeline, the second timeline, the Mega timeline, and the anime timeline. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green are considered by many to be the first set of games in the original timeline.
He has to struggle to be seen as normal. When we come back, what all the fuss is about, at least to the 8-year-old set in this country.
Bring all your skill.
Be forewarned if you haven't been already, the hottest thing in the 12 and under set is coming soon to a theater near you. Pokémon the movie joins Pokémon the video game and Pokémon the trading card as must-sees and must-haves. To start us off tonight, NBC News correspondent Colleen Dominguez on the craze that has now hit Hollywood.
More than a game.
Anybody know how to play this, how to get to the next level?
Or a top-rated TV show, Pokémon is an undeniable obsession with children across the country. The upcoming Pokémon the First movie recently caused such a frenzy that the switchboard at Warner Brothers was flooded with 70,000 calls a minute from people desperate for tickets. The animated Japanese import created by Nintendo also holds the top 5 video game slots. So what exactly is a Pokémon? Cute, cuddly characters who become supercharged so they can fight their enemies. When it comes to the biggest Pokemon craze, it has to be the trading cards. This 747 arrived today from Tokyo, packed with the latest collectible cards.
Wow, all those?
Just how long will this fad last? Retailers hope well into the holiday shopping season. Colleen Dominguez, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Okay, picture this. It's dark outside, you have the day off. Where are you? Lined up around the block, waiting to wrestle the person next to you for the last Pokemon on the shelf, of course.
Oh my gosh, yeah, everybody's like waiting for this. This is our biggest day, biggest weekend, so everybody's ready to go.
Good thing, because the bargain hunters were ready too. We sent photojournalist and early riser Joe Casillas out to the stores to ask some burning questions.
What are you doing here this early?
I have no idea. I don't ever do this. So today I thought I would take a chance and come stand in line. They've got some good coffee and waiting for the doors to open.
You're the first in line. What time did you get here this morning?
6:15.
Why?
Well, my son drug me out.
Why did he drag you out here?
Pokemon.
Pokemon's a big deal.
Oh yeah, at our house.
Once the door swung open, the madness really kicked in, and it wasn't long before the lines inside rivaled those outside.
Pokemon cards? No.
They're gone. They're all gone.
What brought you down here?
That thing? That electronic dartboard?
And Pokemon.
Oh yeah, and that dumb Pokemon thing.
But Pokemon wasn't the only attraction, of course. Plenty of deals awaited shoppers no matter where they went.
Got it?
Got it.
I won the Pikachu backpack.
And add up the discounts and the lack of sleep, it's just a recipe for a good time.
You're having way too much fun.
No, I'm not. Why not? You meet up with some other buddies, you know, and hey, we're having a good time.
Yeah, you are. Reminder here, it's only 7 a.m. For those of you who slept in today, I'll see you when we're doing our hardcore shopping, probably the day before Christmas. Jacqueline Getty, News Channel 8.
Suddenly came 1999, and the United States had become infected with what is now known as Pokemania. Words cannot do justice as to how massively popular Pokemon had become among the children of the United States. Pokemon was everywhere, on store shelves, on TV, on cereal boxes, on school playgrounds, in bedrooms of millions of children across the nation. It was the biggest pop culture phenomenon since Star Wars. It was inescapable. If you were a parent in 1999 with at least one boy of at least 6 or 7 years old, you knew what Pokemon was. Pokemon had taken the country by storm, and it showed no signs of slowing down, especially with a new upcoming theatrical movie to be released. Generation 1 saw the release of 2 Pokemon movies. Pokemon the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back, released in Japan on July 18, 1998, and in the United States on November 12, 1999. Despite being critically panned, Mewtwo Strikes Back debuted at number 1 on the US box office charts, making over $10 million on its opening day of release. It would go on to gross $163,644,662 worldwide, and become the highest-grossing anime film in the United States, and the 4th highest-grossing animated film based on a TV show worldwide. The second film that released during Generation 1 was entitled Pokémon the Movie 2000: The Power of One. It released in Japan on July 17, 1999, and released in the United States on July 21, 2000. The movie's opening day in the US was only about $1 million less than its predecessor and debuted at number 3 on the US charts. It would go on to gross $133,949,270 worldwide, making it slightly less successful than the previous film, but it did succeed a little bit more with critics than the first film did. While kids completely understood and adored the franchise, parents were perplexed and even a bit frightened as to what this franchise was promoting to their children. If you were a parent from 1999 to 2001, you either considered Pokemon to be a valuable educational tool for your children, or you considered Pokemon to be your sworn enemy. Many parents and adults denounced the franchise all over the world for a multitude of reasons, ranging from religious freedom, to fear of racism, to animal rights violations, and causing gambling addictions in children. Pokémon also had some close calls and stirred up some more unintentional controversy during its late 90s and early 2000s craze as well. One of the most vocal groups against Pokémon was the Christian community. In the games, Pokémon change forms and get stronger as they gain experience from battle, or through by coming in contact with various special stones. The games call this process evolution, much to the disdain of many Christians who believed the franchise was supporting Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and teaching it to their children. This, of course, goes against the Christian teachings that everything was created by God. Eventually, however, the Christian satellite TV network, SAT2000, located in the Holy Vatican City, addressed the concerns of parents about Pokémon and said that the franchise is, quote, full of inventive imagination, end quote, and has no, quote, harmful moral side effects, end quote. Christians weren't the only religious group to protest the Pokémon brand, however. Both Jewish and Muslim groups have stood against Pokémon as well. The Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish civil rights group, was angered at what they perceived to be a swastika on the Japanese version of the Pokémon trading card Koga's Ninja Trick. The swastika, being a symbol for the Nazi party that was responsible for the deaths of millions of Jews during World War II, was seen as highly offensive to the Anti-Defamation League. However, this symbol was misinterpreted. The symbol is actually a manji, a Buddhist symbol that symbolizes universal harmony and the balance between opposites. The Anti-Defamation League eventually recognized that this symbol was not meant to offend the Jewish community, but Nintendo removed the symbol from future prints of the card out of respect. Saudi Arabia went as far as to ban all Pokémon products from the country in 2001, fearing that the card game promoted Zionism due to what they believed to be the Star of David being printed on various cards, as well as for promoting Christianity and Freemasonry by the appearance of crosses and triangles in various card art. The brand was also boycotted due to a perceived notion that the card game promoted gambling, a vice highly forbidden in Muslim doctrine. Gambling was a huge concern not just for the Saudi Arabians, but for many adults introduced to the Pokémon trading card game as well. In 1999, 2 New York children sued Nintendo, claiming that the Pokémon TCG had caused their gambling addiction. Many elementary and middle schools across the USA had also banned Pokémon trading cards from the classroom and playground, as kids were being distracted from classes as well as buying and selling the cards on the playground. The African American community also actively spoke out against Pokémon. On January 5th, 2000, children's book author Carol Weatherford accused the Pokémon Jinx of being a racist stereotype for her black skin, big eyes and lips, and for her wearing gloves, all of which were characteristics of minstrel show performers in the pre-civil rights era, who aimed to humorously portray African Americans through offensive stereotypes by darkening their skin with face paint. Jinx was also accused of being of the mammy archetype, a stereotype for black women that painted them to be very overweight and the dominant authority figure in a household. However, Weatherford's argument doesn't explain everything about Jinx's design. The debate about this Pokémon's true intentional inspiration has waged on for over a decade within the Pokémon fandom, with no real definitive theory to completely argue against Carol Weatherford's claim that Jinx is racist, but there are 2 widely accepted ones. The first is that Jinx is meant to represent Hel, the guardian of the dead from Nordic mythology, that has been depicted with black skin and blonde hair. This would explain Jinx's ice typing and her flowing blonde hair. Her costume also may be explained as stemming from Nordic Viking traditions, as it's very reminiscent of the one worn by Brunhilde in Wagner's opera epic The Ring Cycle. This argument is compelling, but fails to take the fact that Hel is depicted to have black skin on only half of her face into consideration. The other theory is that Jinx is based on the Gunguro girl fad in Japan in the late 90s, where teenage girls would heavily tan their skin to make it as dark as possible, use eyeshadows and lipstick to embellish their facial features, and bleach their long hair to be blonde or silver. The description does match Jinx pretty well, and since the fad originated in the same place as the Pokémon games, it seems plausible. However, not only is the timing for this fad inconsistent with the creation of Jinx and the release of Pokémon Red and Green in Japan, but the fad itself is in fact racist, as it was created for Japanese girls to mimic the look of black women involved in the hip-hop culture of the late 90s. Gongoro itself literally translates to blackface. As a response to Carol Weatherford's criticism, episodes of the anime that featured Jinx were banned, all toy products that featured Jinx were pulled from store shelves, and all future representations of Jinx featured her skin being purple instead of black. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, otherwise known as PETA, has attacked Pokémon several times, particularly in the form of flash game parodies that aim to express their belief that Pokémon promotes animal abuse due to the fact that the creatures are allegedly forced to fight each other, are captured against their will, and are stored in tightly confined Pokéballs without light, food, water, or love. The Pokémon community has been at constant war with PETA to refute their claims, and often argue that Pokémon trainers form a bond of love and trust with their Pokémon, that the Pokémon are willing combatants in every fight, and that most Pokémon actually enjoy being in their Pokéballs. Later in Pokémon's lifespan, these claims by PETA would fuel an idea for the plot of an upcoming set of games in the main video game series. Pokémon also holds a very shameful world record: most photosensitive epileptic seizures caused by a television show. On December 17, 1997, the Pokémon anime episode Den-o Senshi Porygon, translated as Electric Soldier Porygon in English, aired on over 37 stations across Japan and was watched by nearly 4.6 million households. In the episode, the main character Ash and his friends Misty and Brock digitally enter the Pokémon Center's Pokéball transporter after they find out there is something wrong with it. Once inside, they realize the evil Team Rocket has tampered with the system, and a battle between the computer Pokémon Porygon and Team Rocket's Porygon ensues. Nurse Joy, the Pokémon Center's resident nurse, is unaware that Ash and his friends are within the hospital's computer system, and thinks that the battle going on between the two Porygon within the Pokémon Center's computer system is instead a virus. She activates an antivirus program on the computer which, inside the system, appear as missiles that attack Ash and his friends. To protect the group, Ash's partner Pokémon Pikachu uses his Thundershock attack on the incoming missiles. This causes a huge explosion that rapidly flashes red and blue colors on the screen. This scene caused 685 children, 310 boys and 375 girls, to be sent to the hospital. Some children suffered seizures, blindness, convulsions, and even lack of consciousness. None of the affected children died from the incident, but the anime was awarded its disgraceful honor by the Guinness Book of World Records in 2004. Pokémon took a 4-month hiatus from broadcasting to recover from the incident before eventually returning on April 16, 1998. The episode has since been edited in the Japanese release, banned in the English dub, and Porygon, along with its evolutionary forms, have made very few appearances in Pokémon animation since, even though Porygon was not the cause of the incident. There have been several cases of Pokémon episodes also being banned either periodically or indefinitely due to time sensitivity. In Japan, several episodes were banned from broadcast due to depictions of situations similar to the 2004 earthquake in Chuetsu, Japan, that killed 68 people and left nearly 5,000 injured, as well as the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Tohoku, Japan, that killed almost 16,000 people, left over 6,000 injured, and caused over 2,500 to go missing. In 2014, additional episodes were banned due to the tragic sinking of the MV Seoul, which took the lives of 295 passengers as well as 2 rescue divers and also caused 9 people to go missing. In the United States, one episode was banned due to similarities to the terrorist attacks carried out on the World Trade Center in New York City on September 11, 2001. Other episodes were banned in 2005 for similarities to Hurricane Katrina, a storm that killed nearly 2,000 people in the southeastern United States. Despite all these controversies, Pokémon managed to remain as popular as ever, and Game Freak was hard at work on the next title in the main series.